The courtroom was packed, the air heavy with anticipation. All eyes were on the judge as he prepared to deliver the verdict. At the back of the room, Olivia Carter sat still, her sharp gaze locked on the proceedings. She wasn't just another spectator, she had a reason to be here. The trial had been a sham from the start. Two white police officers stood accused of excessive force, yet the judge dismissed critical evidence. Witness testimonies were ignored. The prosecutor hesitated, afraid to challenge the clear bias in the room. Olivia had seen cases like this before. Justice wasn't just delayed, it was being buried. As the judge spoke, Olivia noticed a uniformed officer near the exit glancing at her repeatedly. At first, she ignored it, but then his gaze hardened. He squared his shoulders, whispered something into his radio, and began moving toward her. She remained seated, calm but alert. "You need to leave," the officer said, his voice low but firm. Olivia frowned. "Excuse me?" "This trial is closed to unauthorized personnel." A murmur rippled through the crowd. People turned, whispering among themselves. Why was this woman being singled out? "I have every right to be here," Olivia replied evenly. The officer's stance stiffened. "Ma'am, I'm not asking again. Step outside." The judge peered over his glasses. "What's the issue, officer?" "She's refusing to leave, Your Honor." The judge eyed Olivia coldly. "If law enforcement says you need to leave, then you need to leave." Olivia inhaled slowly. She knew exactly what was happening, but she wasn't going anywhere. The officer loomed over Olivia, waiting for her to comply. The whispers in the courtroom grew louder, uncertainty spreading through the crowd. Why was she being targeted? Olivia didn't move. She kept her posture straight, her hands folded in her lap. "This is a public courtroom," she repeated, her voice even. "I have every right to be here." The officer's expression hardened. "I won't ask again." People around them watched closely. Some pulled out their phones, sensing that something was about to happen. The judge cleared his throat, irritated. "Officer, remove her from the courtroom." A hush fell over the room. The officer reached for Olivia's arm, his grip tightening. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," Olivia said calmly. The officer hesitated. "Ma'am, I don't want to escalate this." "Then don't," Olivia replied, meeting his gaze. "Step away." The officer frowned, his patience thinning. He pressed his radio. "Unit 4, I have an uncooperative individual, proceeding with removal." A pause, then a crackling response came through. "Unit 4, stand by." The officer blinked. "Repeat." A longer pause, then the radio crackled again. "Unit 4, do not engage. A directive is incoming." The courtroom fell into stunned silence. The officer looked confused. The judge narrowed his eyes. Olivia simply waited. A moment later, the officer's radio blared again. "All units, a direct order from the White House is incoming. Stand down immediately." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. The officer took a step back, his face pale. And Olivia? She barely even blinked. The courtroom was frozen in silence. The officer's face paled, his hand still hovering near Olivia's arm. The words from his radio rang in everyone's ears. "A direct order from the White House is incoming. Stand down immediately." Murmurs spread like wildfire. The spectators exchanged shocked glances. Even the defense attorneys, who had been smirking moments ago, suddenly sat up straighter. The judge, clearly unsettled, adjusted his glasses. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded. The officer swallowed hard, his hand trembling as he pressed his radio again. "Control, can you confirm that transmission?" A sharp voice responded instantly. "Confirmed. You are to stand down. Miss Olivia Carter is not to be removed under any circumstances." A ripple of shock coursed through the courtroom. The prosecutor, who had been hesitant before, now looked between Olivia and the judge, suddenly sensing that the power in the room was shifting. Olivia remained perfectly composed. She slowly stood, straightening her blazer. "I believe that settles the matter," she said, her voice even. The officer stepped back instinctively, no longer sure of himself. He looked toward the judge, silently asking for guidance. But the judge looked just as confused, and now nervous. Then the radio crackled again. This time, the voice on the other end was calm but firm. "A senior White House official is en route to the courtroom. All proceedings are to continue under direct federal oversight." The room erupted in stunned whispers. The judge's face turned an unnatural shade of white. The two officers on trial exchanged panicked glances. "And Olivia?" She smiled. Justice had just walked through the door. The tension in the room was unbearable. The officer who had tried to remove Olivia now stood frozen, his face tight with confusion. The judge shifted uncomfortably, clearly losing control of the courtroom. Then, the doors swung open. A sharply dressed man in a dark suit strode in, his White House credentials clipped to his jacket. The golden emblem gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and the moment he entered, the murmurs died instantly. Authority radiated from him. Every movement was precise, his gaze sharp as he scanned the room. He wasn't just here to observe, he was here to take over. The judge cleared his throat, trying to recover. "And who exactly are you?" he asked, attempting to keep his voice steady. The man stopped near Olivia and turned to face the judge. His expression didn't waver. "My name is Samuel Hayes, senior legal advisor to the White House." The courtroom collectively inhaled. Samuel turned slightly, nodding to Olivia in quiet acknowledgement. Then he looked back at the judge, his voice smooth but unshakable. "Miss Carter is a high-ranking federal official. She is here on behalf of the administration." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "I trust that won't be a problem." The judge visibly tensed. Beads of sweat formed at his temple. He had been so confident when ordering Olivia to leave. Now his position was crumbling beneath him. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Because there was nothing he could say, Olivia sat back down, calm, in control, unshaken. The game had just changed, and everyone in that courtroom knew it. The judge's fingers tightened around his gavel, his authority slipping through his grasp. He had spent the entire trial favoring the officers, dismissing evidence and silencing voices that mattered. But now, under the sharp gaze of a White House official, he was trapped. Samuel Hayes stood firm, his suit crisp, his posture commanding. Olivia remained seated, her hands neatly folded, watching the judge with an expression that said, "Go ahead, try it now." The judge licked his lips. This is highly unorthodox," his voice wavered. "This courtroom has its own procedures, and Samuel didn't blink. "And now it has federal oversight," he said smoothly. "I assume you have no objections." The judge's jaw clenched. If he refused, it would mean challenging the White House directly. His career, his reputation, everything was at stake. He exhaled sharply. No objections." The defense attorney, who had been so confident earlier, shifted nervously. The two officers on trial sat stiffly, their arrogance replaced by unease. Samuel nodded. "Good. Then let's proceed." The prosecutor, emboldened by the sudden shift, sat up straighter. For the first time since the trial began, he had power. He shuffled his papers, preparing his next argument with renewed confidence. But Olivia wasn't done yet. She leaned forward slightly, locking eyes with the judge. "Since federal oversight is now in place," she said smoothly, "perhaps we should take another look at the evidence." The judge hesitated, because now he had no choice. The courtroom was dead silent. Every eye was on the judge, waiting to see what he would do. He had dismissed crucial evidence before, ignored video footage, disregarded witness testimonies, and let the officers' lies stand unchallenged. But now, with a White House official overseeing everything, his usual tactics wouldn't work. The judge cleared his throat, stalling for time. "The evidence in question has already been reviewed," he muttered, shifting uncomfortably. Olivia didn't break eye contact. "Then reviewing it again shouldn't be a problem." Samuel Hayes crossed his arms. "I agree. Let's bring it forward." The defense attorney shot to his feet. "Your Honor, this is outrageous. This case was nearly concluded, and now—" Samuel turned his sharp gaze on him. "And now justice will be served, unless you have a problem with that." The lawyer hesitated. If he pushed too hard, he wouldn't just be arguing against the court, he'd be arguing against the federal government. He swallowed his frustration and sat back down. The prosecutor, now fully in control, nodded confidently. "Your Honor, I request the body cam footage be played again, for the record." The judge hesitated, but he had no way out. "Proceed," he finally muttered. A court clerk moved quickly, pulling up the footage on the large courtroom screen. Then, play. The room stiffened as grainy but clear video filled the screen. And this time, no one could ignore what was about to be exposed. The courtroom held its breath as the body cam footage played on the large screen. The grainy video flickered to life, and within seconds, the truth became undeniable. The two officers on trial had claimed they acted in self-defense, that the suspect had been resisting, but the footage told a different story. On screen, the suspect, an unarmed black man, was cooperative. His hands were raised, his voice calm. "I'm not resisting," he said clearly. Then, without warning, a brutal strike. Gasps rippled through the room as the footage showed the officers slamming him to the ground. The man's head hit the pavement hard, his body going limp as the officers continued to strike him again and again. A woman in the courtroom covered her mouth. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." But the most damning moment was yet to come. The footage didn't end after the attack. The officers, believing no one could hear them, exchanged words. "He's out cold. Just say he went for your gun." "Yeah, that'll work." The defense attorney's face turned ashen. The officers on trial, their hands gripped the table, eyes darting around, searching for a way out. Olivia watched without blinking. The judge shifted uncomfortably, his earlier confidence completely gone. Samuel Hayes leaned forward. His voice, though calm, carried the weight of authority. "Would you like to explain this, Your Honor?" The judge's face drained of color, because now there was no way to cover it up. The judge's fingers trembled as he gripped his gavel, his face paling by the second. The courtroom was still in shock, the officers' own words echoing in their minds. "Just say he went for your gun." There was no defending this, no twisting the truth, no way out. The defense attorney cleared his throat, desperate to regain control. "Your Honor, we need time to..." Silence. The judge's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried an unmistakable edge of fear. He turned to the prosecution. "Do you have anything to add?" The prosecutor, now with the power on his side, stood with newfound confidence. "Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to remind the court that before this footage was played, these officers maintained that they acted in self-defense. They lied, under oath." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Olivia watched the judge squirm under the weight of the truth. He had been so certain the case would go in the officer's favor. Now he was trapped. Then Samuel Hayes spoke. "Your Honor, in light of this new evidence, I believe the case requires federal intervention, effective immediately." A collective gasp. The judge's eyes darted around, searching for an escape, but Samuel wasn't finished. "Additionally, we will be reviewing past cases under your jurisdiction, cases where evidence may have been ignored." The judge's entire body stiffened, because he knew this wasn't just about today. This was about everything he had done before. And now, he was next. The judge's face twitched, his grip tightening around the gavel as if it were the only thing keeping him together. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs, everyone realizing that this wasn't just a trial anymore. This was an exposure. Samuel Hayes' words hung in the air like a storm cloud. Cases where evidence may have been ignored. The judge swallowed hard. He had overseen dozens of cases just like this one. Cases where he had turned a blind eye, dismissed evidence, protected officers who didn't deserve protection. And now, they were coming for all of them. The two officers at the defense table were still in shock. Their lawyer tried to whisper something to them, but neither man reacted. They had walked into this trial with absolute confidence, knowing the system would shield them. Now that shield was shattered. The prosecutor pressed forward. "Your Honor, given the overwhelming evidence, the state moves to have these officers remanded into custody immediately." The defense attorney sprang to his feet. "Objection, that's highly irregular." Samuel cut him off. "What's irregular?" he said smoothly. "Is officers lying under oath, fabricating evidence, and brutally attacking an unarmed citizen. But here we are." The judge hesitated. He didn't want to do it, but under the weight of the truth, under the watchful eyes of the White House, he had no choice. He gritted his teeth. "The motion is granted." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The two officers stiffened. Reality sank in. They weren't leaving as free men. They were leaving in handcuffs. The two officers sat frozen, their faces drained of color. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. They were supposed to walk away protected, untouchable. Now they were about to be arrested. The judge's voice wavered. "Officers, please rise." Slowly, they stood, their movements stiff, their arrogance replaced with pure fear. The bailiff stepped forward, handcuffs gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Click, click. The sound of the cuffs snapping shut echoed through the silent courtroom. A woman in the gallery whispered, "Finally." One of the officers snapped. "This is a damn setup," he shouted, thrashing against the bailiff's grip. "You can't do this! We're cops!" His partner, now trembling, hissed, "Shut up. but it was too late. Samuel Hayes watched, unmoved. Olivia sat calmly, her expression unreadable. The judge, now sweating, tried to regain control. "This court is adjourned. Not so fast." All eyes turned to Samuel. He stepped forward, his voice steady. "There's still the matter of judicial misconduct." The room stilled. The judge froze. "Excuse me?" Samuel's lips curved into a slight smile. "You didn't think we were stopping with them, did you?" Gasps erupted. The judge's hands trembled, because now his time was up. The judge's face went pale as the courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judicial misconduct. 2 words that could end his career, his life as he knew it. He gripped his gavel tightly, his knuckles white. "I don't know what you're insinuating," he stammered, but his voice lacked authority now. Samuel Hayes didn't blink. "I think you do." The prosecutor stepped forward, emboldened. "Your Honor, we have reason to believe that you have suppressed evidence in multiple cases, that you have consistently ruled in favor of law enforcement, even when the facts proved otherwise." The murmurs grew louder. The judge's hands shook. "This is preposterous. I have served this court with integrity for decades." Olivia finally spoke, her voice cool and unwavering. "Then you won't mind an investigation?" The judge flinched. Samuel nodded. "Effective immediately, a full federal review will be conducted into your past rulings, every case you've overseen, every decision you've made." The judge gritted his teeth. "You can't do this. It's already done." A door swung open. A pair of federal agents entered, their suits crisp, their expressions unreadable. The room went silent. The lead agent stepped forward, holding out an official document. "Judge Whitmore, you are under federal investigation. Please come with us." Gasps filled the room. The judge sat paralyzed. The power he once held, gone. For the first time in his life, he was the one with no way out. The courtroom was dead silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Judge Whitmore's chest rose and fell rapidly. His world, his carefully built kingdom of power and control, was collapsing. He opened his mouth, searching for a defense. But what could he say? The evidence was overwhelming. The cases he had dismissed, the officers he had protected, the victims he had ignored. It was all coming back to haunt him. One of the federal agents stepped forward. "Sir, if you do not comply, we will be forced to escort you out." The judge's jaw tightened. His entire life he had commanded the room. With a single word, he could silence attorneys, dismiss evidence, and shape verdicts. But not today. His eyes darted to Olivia, who remained calm, composed, and powerful. He had underestimated her. He had assumed she was just another black woman in the gallery, powerless and invisible. He had been so wrong. Slowly, his trembling hands released the gavel. It thudded against the desk, the sound marking the end of his reign. He stood, stiff and robotic. The federal agent took his arm. The moment he stepped down from the bench, whispers erupted. People exchanged stunned glances. A few even smiled. This was justice in real time. As the agents led him toward the exit, Olivia finally spoke. One corrupt judge down, many more to go. And the whole room knew she meant it. As Judge Whitmore was escorted out, the courtroom buzzed with electricity. A man who once decided fates had now become the accused. The very system that had protected him for years had finally turned against him. The defense attorney, still in shock, turned to Samuel Hayes. "This is outrageous. You're destroying careers over one case?" Samuel's gaze was cold. "We're not destroying careers. We're exposing corruption." The defense attorney opened his mouth to argue but shut it just as fast. He knew there was no winning this battle. Meanwhile, Olivia sat back, watching the pieces fall. This wasn't just about one judge or 2 corrupt cops. This was about the entire system. And today, the cracks had been exposed for all to see. The prosecutor turned to Olivia, a newfound respect in his eyes. "You knew this would happen, didn't you?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she let the moment settle. Then, she said simply, "I knew the truth would come out. It always does." The officers, still in handcuffs, looked around desperately for someone to save them, but the system they had counted on had collapsed right in front of them. Outside, the media frenzy had begun. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions. The world was already watching. And this was only the beginning. Olivia exhaled slowly, her job not yet done. There were more battles to fight. The moment Olivia stepped outside the courthouse, a wall of reporters swarmed her. Cameras flashed, microphones were shoved toward her, and voices blurred together in a frenzy of questions. Miss Carter, did you expect the judge to be removed? Is this the beginning of a federal crackdown on police corruption? How high does this go? Olivia paused, her expression composed. She knew how to handle the media. She didn't react. She controlled the narrative. She raised a hand, and the crowd hushed. Today was not about revenge, she said firmly. It was about justice. This case is just one of many, but let me be clear, corruption will no longer be ignored. The cameras snapped relentlessly. The clip would be played on news stations across the country. The defense attorney slipped out of the courthouse, his face tight with anger. He had lost, completely. The two officers, still in handcuffs, were shoved into the back of a police vehicle. A bitter irony, they were now the ones being taken away. A voice called from the crowd. Miss Carter, what happens next? Olivia glanced at Samuel Hayes, who gave her a knowing nod. She turned back to the cameras. We're just getting started. The reporters erupted with more questions, but Olivia had said enough. She walked away, the power of the moment undeniable. The system had been shaken, but the real battle was still ahead. As Olivia walked away from the courthouse, the weight of the day settled over her. The battle was won, but the war, far from over. Samuel Hayes caught up to her. You just put the entire justice system on notice. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Good, they should be worried. The media frenzy behind them continued, the scandal already spreading like wildfire. News anchors dissected every moment. Headlines flashed across screens. Corrupt judge falls after White House intervention. Police officers arrested in shocking courtroom reversal. Olivia Carter, the woman who took on the system and won. Samuel glanced at his phone. DC wants a meeting. They're ready to push for a full federal review of similar cases. Olivia nodded. This was only the beginning. Across town, in a police precinct, the arrested officers sat in holding cells, their futures crumbling. The same system that once protected them had now turned its back. Inside the courthouse, other judges and prosecutors whispered nervously. If Whitmore fell, who was next? The fear had spread. Olivia looked up at the sky, inhaling deeply. The fight for justice wasn't just about one courtroom, one case. It was about every person who had ever been silenced. And now, they had a voice. She turned to Samuel, her stance strong. Let's get to work. And with that, a new era of accountability had begun. If you believe in justice, accountability, and standing up against corruption, share this video with your friends and family. Let the world see that change is possible. Leave a comment below. Do you think the system is finally changing, or is this just the beginning? And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful story. Together, we can demand the justice we all deserve. Thank you for watching.